there you go. What a Friday it is so far. We've just got a number of items just making the headlines worthy of note as it will affect a wide range of people. Well, we do have Mr. Adegboruwa, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. He joins us from our studios in Lagos. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you.
We'll talk about the social media regulation, but we need to, could you give us your impression, first of all of this back and forth about the Army's Operation Positive ID? What do you think of it?
Well, I'm sure you know by now that in Nigeria, identification is not by documents. The Constitution clearly gives every citizen a right to that citizenship by birth. I'm a citizen of Nigeria by birth through my parents, and that applies to every other person who is claiming citizenship by birth. So I get embarrassed when I hear that you need to identify yourself positively, whatever that means. The resultant effect of this is that we seem to just be acknowledging failure of intelligence, failure of security, and it's important that we do not put ourselves in this situation whereby we create the impression that we're at war, because we are not at war. It is the security agencies who have the responsibility to curtail crime, either kidnapping, terrorism, or whatever other crime that has led to this concern. So I believe that majority of Nigerians are law-abiding people, and we don't need this at this time to give the impression that we're conquered people that need to justify our citizenship. So I believe that it's a form of extremism on the part of the security agencies, and I'm sure that in the course of time, that program will be subject to some kind of rethinking. And in our democratic experience, since the National Assembly has given a directive by way of passing a resolution through the House of Representatives and the Senate, it will be good for the executive to allow that to play out and not give the impression that we do not respect our institutions. I understand another learned senior advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Femi Falana, is already in court. So I think with the resolution of the National Assembly and the court case filed, the Nigerian Army will be better advised to await further resolution of these matters on these platforms before going ahead with that program so that it does not result into contempt of court or contempt of the National Assembly. Thank you.
But this works. If, even though the members of the House of Reps think the position or the office of the Commander-in-Chief notwithstanding, that if any of such matters have got to proceed, whether or not the Army have not heard from the CNC, if the House of Reps have waited and saying, well, let us investigate and find out what is going on, they may just need to hold up. But if they haven't heard from CNC, can they proceed up until they hear from the CNC?
That's the point I actually made. That's the point I actually made. Presently, it will be illegal for the Nigerian Army to turn us into a war situation whereby you just get to the street and you see soldiers everywhere. Once the House of Representatives has given a vote in their proceedings by which they pass a resolution asking that that operation be suspended.
I'm not sure that the House of Reps, have. They, at the time, had referred it to their committee on the Army, who then invited the Army. They are taking a look at the matter, but I'm not sure they've come to a collective position. And even if the House has, I thought that both chambers were supposed to agree on a certain matter before the Army can fully stop. Is that the way it works?
The point I'm making is this. We have a democratic system of government involving separation of powers and checks and balances. So there is the executive, there is the legislature, and then there's the judiciary. Once the National Assembly has waded into this matter with a view to examining the propriety or otherwise of the exercise, it behoves the Nigerian Army to respect that institution by suspending the exercise pending the conclusion of that investigation. And then the second point is that once there is a suit filed already in court challenging that exercise, whether there is an injunction granted positively or not, as a form of respect for the authority and integrity of the court, the Nigerian Army should respect that suit and submit itself to civil authority by getting their own lawyer to go and defend the exercise in court. But if you go ahead with the exercise, simultaneously with the investigation of the National Assembly, simultaneously with the court proceedings already pending, then, of course, it's like a fait accompli, whereby even if the case succeeds, the operation will have been carried out, which is a concern for me. A concern for me.
Well, another concern, if we might call it that, is the proprietary or otherwise of the action in the first place, Mr. Adegboruwa. Should this exercise have been carried out by the military at all in the first place? Because many people argue that, look, if the police is supposed to be at the forefront of civil security and all of that, why is it the army, and why are we not hearing from the police at all? How do you respond to that?
First of all, let us understand that the Constitution has granted a fundamental right to every citizen for free movement. And the operative word there is free. You should be free to move around. The only time that your freedom to movement could be curtailed is if you have committed an offense or you are suspected to have committed an offense and there's need to bring you to court for trial. So you may be restrained by way of arrest or in any other way by way of curtailment of your liberty. But every other citizen who wants to go about their business lawfully are entitled to move freely. Secondly, like I said, you do not ask me to prove my citizenship because I acquire it by birth, and the Constitution is clear about that. So I believe that the operation itself is totally illegal in its conception. Then in its execution, the Nigerian Army is not supposed to be interacting with civilians day by day on a regular basis. If you go through our national life now, the Nigerian Army has taken over the responsibilities of the regular police and other security agencies, you know, in the southeast, in the northeast, and virtually everywhere in the country, there's one operation or the other going on, you know, by the Nigerian Army. And I appreciate their sacrifices. We must not belittle or indeed give the impression that we do not value the sacrifices of the gallant men and women of these forces. But at the same time, there are laws guiding these operations. And I think that we all agree now that you only need the military in situations of extreme national security, not when we are at peace, we are approaching Christmas, everybody's in the mood of moving around all over the country, people are going to be coming from abroad, and only for them to get here and discover that the military has taken over the street as if we're in a situation of war. That's my point, that it is totally unwarranted.
Even though many will say, well, that's even the point where security should be heightened to guarantee safety of lives and property if you have more people to protect. But let's move on to this other matter now. And speaking about extremism, the Minister of Information, Lajulai Mohammed, says part of why the government want to regulate social media is to combat extremism, which seems to be taking over social media. So about social media regulation, is this the way to go?
Certainly not. You know, because we are in a situation whereby we begin to suspect that maybe there is some hidden agenda on the part of government. Otherwise, it's just like I'm sitting here. The capacity for my expression is because I'm entitled to speak. That right is fundamental, the right of expression. The capacity to speak is inalienable. It's attached to my humanity as a human being. You can't padlock my mouth. You can't restrain me. The restraints I have are already codified in various legislations in this country. So I am at risk when I say anything that I cannot defend, because I know the consequences in law exist that may damnify me either in damages or some form of restriction of my liberty if I'm involved in any extremism or fake news or lies. So when we get to a situation whereby government is jittery, when we get to a situation whereby citizens are told not to talk, then you fear as if maybe there's something else that we don't know. Otherwise, in every society where there are laws, you operate according to that law. In this country, people have lost their lives and liberty to fight for constitutional rights, to fight for fundamental rights, and we can't take ourselves back to the dark ages whereby government is involved in regulating freedom of speech. And I'm saying this because our constitution is very clear. It is the organic document in this country, and every agency, be you the executive, legislative, or judicial, must give respect to the Constitution. Our Constitution says in Section 22, and it's very clear, that the press, in particular, should have the responsibility and should be free to hold government responsible and accountable to the people of Nigeria. And in particular, Section 22 mentioned the mass media. And so the operative word there is that they should be free. If I'm to hold you accountable, if I'm to make you answerable to the people, how do you then engage in censorship to supervise me in how I make you accountable? I mean, some contradictions. I'm supposed to be a journalist, a Nigerian, a citizen, probe government, ensure transparency, avoid corruption and waste, and hold you accountable to the people of Nigeria for your programs. And then you said, I can only do that if I allow you to regulate me, if I allow you to supervise me. So the right is no longer available. So the point we make, therefore, is this. There are sufficient...
Cited the sections of the Constitution which speak in relation with the with the press, so to speak. The argument right now is that this has gone out of the hands of the press. The press has, even though it might not be regulated, it has its own code of ethics by which it abides. And that's the reason it will not do certain things. You can always hold it accountable. It is not faceless. But social media is a different kettle of fish. Everybody then has that same right that the press now has, or that the press used to have. It has now been democratized, so to speak. However, with the power comes responsibility. It is the side of responsibility now which the government seems to be saying, look, it would seem that people are exercising this power without responsibility. Is this something you think should go on and be left unchecked?
It's my position that Section 22 of the Constitution covers the social media because it talks about mass media. Secondly, the regulation you talk about for the social media already exists in various legislations in this country. We have the Cybercrime Act, Section 24, clearly talks about matters relating to fake news, matters relating to insulting public officers, or anything you say to injure the reputation of people. And it has consequences, 7 million naira fine, and in extreme cases, 25 million naira or 10 years imprisonment. We have the criminal code, which also criminalizes anything that you cannot defend. But generally, even in civil actions, the greatest threat to anything that you do which is not correct is that you will be damnified for it. If I issue any statement which I cannot defend, whether on social media, whether in the traditional media, I will be liable. And so I just give you an example, Maokwe, to see the challenge and threat to what the government is about to do. In this country, somebody went somewhere to buy some things, and then unknown to him that there were cameras everywhere, and then he decided to flaunt his office and started to slap the lady who was to sell the things to him and dragging her and threatening to deploy police. And unknown to the person, this thing had been captured. Before you knew it, it emerged on the social media. And there was outcry all over the nation. If there was no social media, if there was no opportunity for that to get to public domain, Senator Abba Moro would have even by now silenced that lady, that innocent lady, and we will never get to the root of it. And that's just one. In another one that involves security, the Inspector General of Police set up a special crack team to handle special issues of crime. And they got intelligence report that there was a kidnapper somewhere in Taraba State that needs to be arrested. And they were on the way to go and effect the arrest and actually arrested him. And then suddenly some army checkpoint they got to opened fire and killed some of the policemen. And the following day, there was uproar all over the nation because social media came to play. And the army was denying, everybody was denying, but you could not deny the video because it was very graphic. And at the end of the day, because of social media, we got to the truth of the matter, and we knew now what exactly happened. And these are just examples of the advantages and the positive side to social media. I agree with you that there may be some negative side to it. But Malkwe, I tell you, a clear conscience fears no accusation. Unless you have something you are hiding, you shouldn't be afraid of.
If we can.
I can't hear you.
If I may, I'm so sorry. Your examples are taken, even though we must stress that the senator I think you're referring to is Senator Elisha Abo, not Senator Abamoro. I think Abamoro used to be the former Minister of Interior, who served in the Jonathan cabinet. But that said, let's talk about the negatives, because for every positive, of course, there will be negatives. And social media, we all know, is a fantastic tool. I mean, it has done wonderfully well, especially in the area of marketing, in the area of young people being able to project themselves, even in the area of employment and entrepreneurship. However, can we dismiss the negatives? In an era where you also have bots, BOTs, people can have identities, or create identities that are not linked to them, or that cannot be linked to them, where people can manipulate, so to speak. I mean, you saw the debate in the United States over how Russia interfered in the elections, over how algorithms are being employed to reinforce what people believe in, so that if you hold a certain view and they see that you like a particular set of views, you'll get more of those algorithms to reinforce what it is that you already believe. It doesn't provide the balance which traditional media would normally provide. Don't you think that indeed that this could be dangerous at the end of the day to the democracy which we are actually seeking to promote through the media?
No threat whatsoever to our national security, to public morality. I canvass absolute freedom of the press. I canvass unlimited and unrestrained access to mass media, including social media. Indeed, the positive aspects outweigh these negative things you talk about. Now, my position is this, just like you say about in the United States. It's a challenge for the security agencies to up their game in respect of intelligence gathering. I just give you an example. Somebody issued a statement and said, oh, in course of elections in Nigeria, it is possible for politicians to buy judgments in the Supreme Court on social media. I just said, look, I'm a lawyer. This is going to ruin my profession. If it's possible to get the impression that lawyers are not doing anything, you could just walk to a judge and buy a judgment. So I filed a suit in court. And we said, don't arrest the fellow. Don't use any power to regulate him. Come and substantiate this. If it is true that there are judges who are corrupt and selling their judgments, we should name them and shame them. So I filed a suit in court against the author of that statement at the Federal High Court and said, look, help us to substantiate what you have said. Give us the particulars of the person who is able to buy judgment. And we served the suit. And when the author of that reporting saw that it was going to be a challenge, he issued a public apology. And I'll give you another example. In the course of the 2019 elections, a news media ran a documentary that was quite very, very shocking. But we didn't do anything. We couldn't say go and shut it down. The person affected by that documentary, very influential, and as a matter of fact, had the opportunity to be able to say, look, let's shut it down. But he briefed his lawyers, and they went to court. Chief Olanipekun filed the essay and filed a case in court and said, substantiate this documentary. By the time they got to the court, they saw clearly that there was no basis for it. And the other party issued an apology, and they entered terms of settlement. Never in the history of that organization will such documentary ever run again. You will not achieve that through locking up people, through arresting people. Let's have faith in our institutions, especially the judiciary. how will you allow Nigerian Broadcasting Commission to sit down in its office and determine what constitutes fake news? And then you say, in the first instance, we will punish you through the broadcasting code by ensuring that you pay a fine of 5 million naira. That's what the Honorable Minister is proposing. And then in subsequent instances, you can increase the fine. We should have confidence in our institutions. Who determines what constitutes fake news other than the judiciary? How can you impose a fine as an executive arm when there is no conviction, when there is no guilt, there's no verdict, the person has not been tried? So the abuse in such is when you get to a situation whereby a government is seeking to regulate people's freedom, then there is an agenda that is coming. And that agenda is always dictatorship. It's always to ensure that you shut down people.
Let's bring in Mr. Ken Ugbeche, who is the Publicity Secretary of Nigeria Guild of Editors. Mr. Ken, thank you for joining us as well this morning. Well, I'm sure you must have heard some part of what Mr. Adegboruwa was talking about SAN, and then what the minister also intends to do about social media. But if we cast our minds back just for a bit, Facebook, which owns Instagram, did say recently that they have 30,000 people across the world working on safety and security, and that they had been able to remove about a little over 15 million violent content from their site, up from 7.9 million between October to December in the last 3 months. So that itself also speaks about why certain things need to be done. So now that the minister says they want to go ahead and ensure they, in his words, instill sanity in social media, what do you think?
Well, first and foremost, let me thank you. And let me also remind our colleague, a very senior colleague, the Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, a journalist and a lawyer, that he is one of the major beneficiaries of social media. This social media that we are talking about is not a creation of Nigeria. Nigeria did not invent social media. And the companies that play big in the social media are not Nigerian companies. I think they should be directing their anger, if any, at Facebook, at WhatsApp. That's what other governments are doing. When governments want to check social media extremism, because that's what it has become, they don't clamp down on the people. You talk to the players, Facebook, curtail the excesses. That is why you are seeing this upsurge in Facebook saying they are shutting down some sites or individuals. Even in this country, Facebook has blocked some people. At a time in this country, in Nigeria, you could share a WhatsApp video or message to as many people as you wish. But they have limited the sharing to only 5 share per video at a time. These are the things they are doing to also curtail some of these extremisms. Because most times these issues or the news or video are not authored by WhatsApp or Facebook or Instagram. They are authored by individuals and institutions. And let me also remind the minister that under his watch in this country, the president of this country, President Muhammadu Buhari, was away for a long time, and he was sick. But this same minister kept telling Nigerians that the president is not sick. He kept repeating it, that the president is not sick. But when the same Mr. President returned, and to the relief of Nigerians, he admitted that he was sick. He also admitted that he had never been this sick all his life. He even made more references to the nature of the sickness, how he received a blood transfusion. That's from the Mr. President. But this minister was here dishing out what I can call misinformation. That's also fake news.
Just as the minister said there, London Inclusive, they themselves are also proposing measures to regulate the social media. But yes, they're looking at social media companies as well, because they say, look, some things are not just going on right. So would it be out of place to also ensure that in spite of those measures you say that those social media companies are put in place, they're still looking at measures to ensure that things go on properly? So when the minister talks about doing all of those, it's not from their perspective. Not that they're going to clamp down on free speech, such that, I mean, I don't think that they will exclude the NGE from coming to a table, because when the law is proposed, there will be input in those laws. It's not going to be a unilateral document from the ministry to assembly is passed and that's it. So in that circumstance, should we still have cause for concern?
Definitely, I have much cause for concern, because you can't be speaking for the government, Chamberlain. We have seen that he mentioned Singapore, he mentioned United Kingdom, but let me also tell you that this same Singapore that the minister is talking about is very poor. It ranks so poor, so lowly in the Reporters' Freedom of Index for 2019. Reporters Without Borders, the Freedom Index for 2019, where 180 countries were considered. Singapore placed 151. If in a classroom of 180 persons, you place 151, you belong to the failure category. So we cannot be using a state where there is abridgment of freedom of expression as an indicator. The UK,
Mr. Ugbeche, I need to understand your point.
Yes, I'm saying that.
I need to understand your point. Okay, go ahead and talk about the UK, but just to clarify, the questions I put to you were facts that are out there in the public domain. So I don't see how you say speaking for government. I'm just asking questions and not speaking for government, just to make that point clear.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
No problem. But what I'm saying also is that the UK, yes, have done well, but what the UK is doing, and even the Singapore is referring, is not to haul people into jail. Nigeria is not Singapore. Nigeria is not UK. In this government and in previous Nigerian governments, we have seen cases of journalists who have been in detention for over 1 year. It is not done in the UK. What this government should be doing is to partner with the media, not fight with the media. In the Nigerian Guild of Editors, in the Nigerian Union of Journalists, we are not purveyors of fake news. We are not purveyors or progenitors of hate speech. We are practicing journalism within the ambit of the law governing and the code of ethics governing our profession. So we have already abided by what the law says. But to now come in to say it's a fait accompli, because the way the minister is talking about it, they have already made up their mind. So I don't even see them bringing a group of editors to the table or journalists to the table to negotiate or talk about it. It's a fait accompli. He said there's no going back on it. And the way he talks about it, he's talking about it in the manner of we versus them. And we are saying that that is not the way to go. In this age and time where everybody is now a publisher, we are concerned in the media, as orthodox media and the trained media, that some persons are going on the extreme side. But what I'm saying that if there are cases of people going off the curve, test your laws. We have enough laws in this country to test these people, but not to take somebody in the guise of sanitizing social media. Then you are gagging people from expressing their opinion. You cannot gag me from expressing my opinion. You cannot gag me. Yes, you cannot regulate my thoughts.
Well, that point is taken, but can I just ask you this, and then we can move on? Well, you said that the regular media, the traditional media, are not purveyors of fake news. That's taken, but then don't also forget that occasionally you publish what you call corrigendums, just to retract stories that may have been inaccurate, previously. But however, let's go back to this one. There are occasions where people put out information and they don't even know. Do you think, going forward, that we've been able to track what is fake news? Do you think we understand, the people, the Nigerian, understands what is fake news? Because many people just receive information and they just circulate thinking that it is true. Do you think government has been able to track what is fake news? Have we been able to track the root causes of these things? And if we have, what should we be doing? You also made reference to the fact that we should test the laws. Do the people even know that there are such laws?
Let me also give a background to what fake news is. We're not running away from the fact that there's fake news. But fake news is a deliberate act. Fake news is when somebody imagines a thing or even concocts a video and pushes it out. It's a deliberate act. The one you're talking about, people publishing a corrigendum or errata, these are mistakes of the head. Sometimes things go wrong in the newsroom. Not because that thing did not happen, probably because you are not able to defend it. The fact that I'm not able to defend that you said this to me or you told me this, because I didn't record it as my defense, does not mean you didn't say that. So that's an aside. What governments all over the world are doing, and that is because of when the 21st century is a knowledge century, everybody has at least most people have a handheld. If you have a handheld device, you become a publisher. What governments are doing, which Nigerian government should be doing and ought to be doing, is not to clamp down on individuals. I've emphasized this. They should be talking, negotiating with these fake social media companies. They are not faceless. But the people that take advantage to push fake news and hate speech, they may be in Antarctica, they may be in a Cayman Island, and they are talking about Nigeria. How are you going to track them? We don't even have the technology in Nigeria to track some of these things. We don't even have the will. And we don't have, of course, the patience to go to undertake investigations that will expose these kind of persons. But what you do
from that point you just made now,
yeah,
isn't that all the more reason why there should be more concerns? Because if somebody, according to you, is in Antarctica, and then they publish certain things and it shows the URL shows up in Nigeria's space, other countries are saying, look, insofar as it shows up in their own space, it will be subject to their own laws. So what's wrong in us also looking in that way to ensure that someone doesn't stay from a remote corner and
absolutely
then
nothing wrong.
Certain
That's
things
why I
which
said,
can spiral out of control.
Exactly. That's why I made the point that the government should test the laws that it made. There are laws. We have enough laws. If I defame your character, why not take me to the court of law? The senior advocate of Nigeria in the studio here just gave you some instances. I had to go to court. Some people, you have a right to go to court if your character is defamed in any way by an individual, a media organization, or a group of persons. The laws are there. Test the laws. But don't hide under any guise.
Mr. Ugbeche, let's go to the lawyer in the house now, Mr. Adegboruwa, to take us through this. Let's just go quickly to him. So, Mr. Adegboruwa, there is the law. There is the freedom of, the fundamental human right. You've talked about freedom of speech, freedom of privacy. You also made reference to the cybercrime law of 2015. Now, in that law, there are, a number of articles or, spaces assigned for privacy. How do we execute or operate, or to take Mr. Ugbeche's word, test these laws in a way that it balances the rights of the people with the effect of the law? How do we balance this? If we're going to do this, just from some of the references that you have made, clearly there is a need to regulate, what is put out there in social media so as not to incite the environment. So how do we balance all these, both from the people and from the government side?
First of all, let me say that I do not buy into this narrative about fake news, about hate speech, which government is pushing forcefully in order to guide people. The best example I can give you in terms of curtailing the excesses of people who want to use social media for some other reasons that are not helpful to public morality and security is the action of the vice president. Some news came that the vice president was allegedly involved in some financial impropriety in respect of Federal Inland Revenue Service. It was all over the social media. Do you know what the vice president did? He briefed his lawyers. Mr. Femi Atoyebi SAN, Mr. Osaro Egobami SAN, and Mr. Femi Falana. And they wrote to the organizations that published and authored this news. And they were going to go to court. What followed was apologies, and that has died because you could not substantiate it. The point I'm making is this. Both in the Cybercrime Act, in the Copyright Act of Nigeria, in the Press Council Act, in the Criminal Code, we have laws that already exist to take care of these situations that we talk about. And for just a minute, for you to appreciate why I'm passionate about unrestricted access to the media. Section 39 says that every person shall be entitled to freedom of expression, including freedom to hold opinions and to receive and to impart ideas and information without interference. Without interference, without regulation, without obstruction, without hindrance. So the point I'm making is that those interferences that the Honorable Minister is talking about are already existing in several statutes that are in our country here. It is for us to test those laws, to take those things before the court and exercise confidence in the system. Let me give you an example that happened recently.
Clarify this for us, please. When you say the section of the law that you quoted about without interference and you say without regulation, are they used interchangeably? Because the law is there to regulate the function of the broadcast media, they regulate the functions of the print media, so aren't those regulations by themselves?
No, what I mean by without interference is the kind of suggestions coming from the Honorable Minister about changing the broadcasting code to impose penalties on hate speech, on fake news. I'm saying that you do not allow subjective decisions of the executive, such as the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission, to sit down and say, this is hate speech. We should be careful to ensure that this constitution is allowed free rein, because it has taken us a long time to get to where we are. I can hear you.
Can you quickly react to what is happening in the UK right now? I know you have made the instance with individuals, and you say you don't believe in fake news, you don't believe in hate speech. I mean, those are two things that you say. I can't quite remember your words now, but how I'm interpreting them is that you don't think that those kinds of things exist. In the UK, they've been talking about Brexit for a while now, and it would seem that people voted for Brexit based on some information which they had, a lot of which has now been proven not to have been true. And they made their decisions on that. They made a decision which is now affecting an entire country. People are asking for a second chance for people to, with benefit of hindsight, take that vote again. Now, when it comes to things like that, how do you think that, I mean, we've not had that kind of situation in Nigeria, but we have elections and people make their decisions based on what it is that they hear candidates say or things that are pushed out for or against candidates. How do you think that we should react to situations like that, learning from what is happening in other climes?
First of all, I like to make the distinction that Nigeria is a country governed by a written law, which is this constitution. The examples you gave about what is going on in Britain now is a country that is atmosphere that is governed by conventions and unwritten laws. I believe in what my friend here has said, Mr. Ugbeche, that the government should partner with telecom companies. Government should partner with stakeholders in the print and media industry, the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria, the Nigerian Guild of Editors, the Online Publishers Association of Nigeria, to ensure that they self-regulate themselves. This is the point I'm making. Lawyers are regulating themselves. Accountants are regulating themselves. Journalists should have the capacity to have their own code of ethics that will guide against what government calls fake news. What I said was that I believe that is a narrative from government in order to...
It's the larger public. How do we deal with the larger public?
What do you mean by larger public?
Okay, I don't know if you caught that, but I think a major issue right now is the larger public. I mean, Mr. Ugbeche didn't make the point that everybody would have answered as a publisher.
Yeah, but we'll get your point. So self-regulation or government regulation, I think so. Maybe that might be the next point. And how do we proceed from there? So it remains to be seen what the provisions that will be proposed either by the minister or the government, if they want government regulation, or the ones that should come up with the professionals if we're speaking about self-regulation. So, gentlemen, it's a fine place to live because we still got some other matters on the table as well. Well, Mr. Adegboruwa, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, and Mr. Ken Ugbeche, Publicity Secretary of Nigeria Guild of Editors. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for coming on today.